There have been a number of sports leagues that have emerged over the past few years in many different categories. The sport I'm talking about on this episode got its start in 1823 when a young William Webb Ellis picked up a soccer ball, or a football, and ran with it, thus creating the game of rugby. Nearly 60 years later, in 1880, a faster version of the game emerged and became known as Rugby Sevens. Over the past century, Rugby Sevens has grown significantly, including being added to the 2016 Olympics in Rio. Premier Rugby Sevens, also known as PR7s, is one of the newest sports leagues in the United States. Founder and CEO Owen Scannell joins me to talk about how PR7s got its start, what it's all about, and what its future is, next on Sports in the Making. Full disclosure, I personally produced 3 of PR7's television broadcasts this year. This episode has visuals, so if you're listening, be sure to subscribe to the Sports in the Making YouTube channel at Sports Making to see some of what we discuss. All right, Owen Scannell joins me now. He is the founder and CEO of Premier Rugby Sevens. Thank you for joining me, Owen. I've had the pleasure of working with you on the broadcasting side of what we've done for 3 stops in the 2023 season. So just wanted to have you on because I find it fascinating how you're able to start a new league with a new sport in the United States, basically from scratch, and get it going, and now into your 3rd year, going on your 4th year. How did you come up with the idea for something like this happening?
Well, thanks, Don, for having me. It's exciting to be here, and it's been fantastic working together this summer. The concept of PR7s and really kind of the idea, I think, kind of extends back. At least the seeds of the idea extend back to my days in college when I was a rugby player and kind of had my first touch point with the sport. I remember back in kind of the early 2010s, there was a new college rugby championship that aired live on NBC called the Collegiate Rugby Championship, the CRCs. And the lasting kind of impact I remember from it was, I've been I played rugby in college, but picked it up in early in my college days. But I had friends that came out to see rugby 15s, rugby union, kind of standard regular way rules, and the piece of the puzzle, I think, that kind of I guess was a little bit of a lightning bolt, but not kind of at the time, was just how people that had never seen this sport before engaged with Rugby Sevens, right? Where they had tuned into it, they had seen Sevens as a broadcast and a content, if you will, and got it, with that, that maybe had seen different types of rugby before, never really connected with it, or never really understood what was happening, and saw Sevens as a version of the sport that was easily understandable by the average American with a football background. That was kind of the nugget of the idea. I think in thinking about the where sports are going and where things are moving. Obviously I'm a booster for the sport of rugby generally, but I think from a format perspective, if you're looking to create audience, you need to lower the barriers to entry for that new audience to understand what the rules are, what the objectives are, and what's actually happening on the field. I think Sevens does that really well. It simplifies the game. It makes it relatively straightforward. It's catch, run, tackle, score. It's highlight. It's understandable. It's highlights. And in a lot of ways, it's the perfect version to get new people into the game. I think the big question around Sevens, the reason why it didn't exist beforehand, was just really about packaging, right? How do you take this sport that's and I should give the overview of what Sevens is structurally for your audience here, but it's a game that's only 14 minutes long, so it's played on I'd say it's kind of analogous to football if you pulled off the offensive line, right? And what does that game look like? The field's the same size, the width is it's wide, but you're doing it with half the players, and so it leads to a game that's wide open for scoring, and it makes it exhausting. So the game is shortened down to 7-minute halves, right? 14-minute long games. played in this tournament style format. That's not terribly conducive towards a city-based model, right? You don't have a team in one city flying to another city to play for 14 minutes and go home. It's kind of it's more of a tournament style format. It's more structured that way. And so really, I think the challenge with Sevens, the reason why nothing had really happened with it, was just simply because it's a little unorthodox in the way that it has to be presented to an audience. In looking at a lot of the developments in the sports and entertainment landscape in the last 8 to 9 years, right? I think the consolidation and centralization of IP and actually going not just to a single entity model, but to actually a model where the league is actually the driver and owner of all of the teams, was a really cool format, I thought, for Sevens, right? And you've seen it in lacrosse, you've seen it in in a couple other different sports where they've kind of actually, the XFL, where there's kind of that central league model that puts teams out, and thought there was a deployable, scalable, buildable model where you could build a rugby sevens competition that followed a traveling circuit style format, that would kind of pack up and go from city to city and play, almost like a circuit or tour, not dissimilar from what's going on the in the international game, but make a business out of it and make a scalable platform where you were able to build something. And so that was kind of the genesis. Was the idea that there was something in sevens in particular, as a format for an American audience. And then just what the packaging looked like and how did you put it together?
I just kind of like to show some of the people watching a little bit about what Rugby Sevens is about, and just kind of get into the entertainment value of it as well, because it is a fast sport, but you also have some of your announcing teams that really make it fun and are able to give it personality. So here's a quick clip.
Pinkerman goes down and gets a couple of big fends, the captain on captain. Walsh brings down Ben Pinkerman, man from Colorado, from the woods. He has no home, he just lives in the wild. As Raymond goes on the outside, Aki Raymond, oh what a great switch, the Nigerian nightmare finds Hager. Ball over the top, still there. Hightower's coming to claim it for the Steel Toes. He gets a fend going. Bosch is one out the way, Chevalier took a detour, did Shetty. The ball spits free. How could that be? Nelson says, I'll take it. Here come the Southern headliners. Michael Nelson throws it down to Kitione by the New Zealand Flyer. Bashes in a couple. And he finds Will Chevalier, who slides in. The Southern headliners have their second try.
Nelson almost couldn't believe it. It just popped out of here. Google Maps told the ball to reroute, and it's found its way out into Nelson's hand as Chevalier just takes a hot minute to get up. Headliners will not want that man to be going off. Nothing some water won't fix, he says. And it's Walsh with 10 seconds left to take this conversion. You only get 30 seconds to do just about anything in sevens. But he hits the sweet spot right down the middle, and it's 14-0.
Going back to part of the question that I first asked you, at what point did you realize that you could have a viable new league, new sport that's available to the U.S. market?
I think I think we always knew that there was something that was viable. I think the big question was convincing other people that there was something that was viable, or that hopefully I think becomes viable on a standalone basis. It definitely, I think the process here, and I think probably relevant to the podcast, is a lot of the progress is incremental, right? It's it is cool to look at this summer and kind of what we've got as a format and a structure and all the different components of that. And think about kind of the phases of which that came together. We've been This summer we did 5 stops, or we've done 4. We're about to do a 5th in DC. But we have 8 franchises with 8 men's teams and 8 women's teams competing, 2 different conferences, national linear television distribution. So it's really exciting in that capacity. But we started off with a proof of concept, right? We did a one-off pilot tournament in Memphis, Tennessee, an inaugural championship, really to I think show that we could put together a tournament operationally, right? To say, hey, we can go out, we can recruit some of the best players in the world, we can create team names and brands, we can run a tournament, we can put it on TV, we can run some social media, we can put out emails, do all of the things that kind of go with that, and iron out some of the operational kinks along the way. Last year in 2022, we took that model, with a lot of refinement and adjustment, and we said, let's do this in multiple cities, right? Let's see what it takes to put on a 3-stop circuit, figure out what the process looks like, what are the things that we need to iron out to make better, to improve. Did that, and kind of learned, had a lot of great outcomes from that, but also a lot of I think great learning points as well. And then use the experience from that to turn it into 5. But I think a lot of the when I think about even kind of in the run up to 2021 and kind of when this was just in I think pretty much pure concepts phase more than anything, a lot of what we were doing was, I think, identifying what the must-haves were, right, to pull it off, right, and to identify, I think, the key stakeholder groups that we needed to have buy into what we were doing, or to have some sort of connectivity, and work through them all at the same time, right? Because I think one of the things I noticed as we went along is that it was the idea of when did it kind of click, and the answer is it never really clicked. It was more that we had incremental progress with various stakeholders getting on board and saying, sure, we'll take a flyer on this, or sure, we'll at least do this, whether that be some of the initial wave of player ambassadors that we'd signed up, whether it was USA Rugby's sanctioning and buy-in, whether that was the venue partner at Ellison Park signing up, whether that was Fox Sports or TSN just distributing it, whether that was insurance companies willing to underwrite a accident policy. Every all of those steps were simultaneous, and they kind of all helped each other, right? So it was, I think, the interesting part of was just taking those incremental steps as we went along, and having everything make everything else easier as we kept moving forward. And that's something we've seen kind of throughout the 3 years. There's no kind of eureka magic bullet moment. It's really largely about incremental progress and continuing to push independently, because the longer that we exist and the longer that we kind of continue to build, the more, I think, credibility and I don't say trustworthiness, but I think it becomes easier for people to identify what we're doing and say, oh, that's a real thing. That's a there are highlights, there are teams, there are players, there are logos, there are ticket sales and content, right? There's something there, and that's not necessarily in the sports business world. That's not necessarily a guarantee. So for me, it's always made a lot of sense, and continues to make sense. It's just continuing to advance and move the ball forward. A very rugby appropriate metaphor: move the ball forward and advance the ball down the field.
Right. In Pittsburgh on July 23rd, just this last Sunday, I was in the hotel lobby after the event was done, and I was talking to Sean Lindersmith, your director of operations, and Mike Tolkien, your general manager, about some of the things that they feel make this PR7's attempt a very, very you're set up for success. And a couple of things they told me was, one, Sean told me that the buy-in from the players has been unbelievable in terms of taken care of, and he expressed that there have been perhaps some attempts in the past and they didn't really care about those players. And then Mike Tolkien, of course, who's been part of USA Rugby in the past, really had some exciting things to say about the direction that you're heading in. So talk a little bit about the team that you've assembled around you and how they're able to get you to what seems to be like an already established league, even though you've only been around since 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard something a couple of weeks back about, when it actually been very helpful for me. It's like, what is a CEO's job, right? What is my job as the founder here? It's threefold, right? One is setting broad organizational vision and direction. 2 is don't run out of money, and 3 is assemble a world-class team. And the team has been, I think, a really it has been the reason why this is has worked thus far, right? Mike and Sean obviously have been tremendous parts of the team for a number of years now. I think in terms of their kind of buy-in and their belief in, I think, the value of what we're doing and the in the importance of our platform, really. They are always kind of and not just in the sense that they are they themselves, but also the fact that they have kind of been people that have also gone out and created teams around them as well, right? And we've got an expansive team that puts together these events and kind of builds this platform that does a tremendous job, right? And is looking to improve and is always looking at how do we, where do we need to be going to make this successful, right? Not just kind of like, resting on the laurels of, well, great, we've pulled off an event. It's like, there's a long way for us to go still. And especially in terms of opportunities and things to continue to scale. So our team is, I think, the probably the best part of what we've got and what we've built so far. I think a lot of it comes down to the idea that I think people understand that there's an opportunity here to do things and to platform the sport of rugby in a really positive manner, right? Where we are trying to build the visibility, the marketability of the sport, understanding that there are a lot of things that we can do that haven't been done before, and that there's an opportunity for us to be the ones that do them. One of the things that when we go out and look to add people to the team, right, we screen for the big thing. I think the biggest thing I've learned to screen for, right, is the, I hate to use the startup buzzword, but it's the idea that we are a startup company, right? We are a bootstrap trying to build something from the ground up, and that's I think a mentality and identity that we want everybody in our organization to have, right? That is that there are goals that everybody is responsible for kind of collectively, and there's your kind of individual piece of that that you need to go out and figure out, right? And so it's there is, and you got to be able to own it, answer about it, talk through with the why, and be accountable for it, right? And I think people have kind of taken that to heart and really embrace the challenge of ultimately what we're trying to do and trying to build, and how to how to do that in an increasingly efficient and productive manner. And so it's been very, I think, for me, rewarding in a lot of ways to see how people have embraced the challenge that we've set down and what we're kind of continuing to put in front of them.
Well, and I'd be remiss if I left out Matt Rosemeyer, who's on the ground. He's probably the first one there and the last one to leave. And then Nicole Palumbo, who handles your digital aspect of it. How, when you get to game day, I know there's a lot that goes into it prior to that, and we'll get to that in a second, but when you get to game day, other than entertaining the fans and getting them in the door, is there any kind of focus that you have that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think we look at our business as really two components, right? There's a live event experience that's happening for fans and for players and participants and coaches and staff. And then there's a distributed content piece, right? And those two things kind of have to come together and work together to produce something that works for both parties, or both kind of areas of distribution. When we look to build out our match day, I think we are always asking the question of, what does this look and feel like to somebody in one of those two scenarios, right? If you're somebody that's sitting in the stands, what does it look like and feel like when you're in the stands? So when we had our first event this year, one of the things I think kind of jumped out at me was, when we had broadcast breaks in the run of show, it was quiet, right? It was like, hey, what's happening now, right? And people understand that it's there's a broadcast break, or the commercial break happening, but I think what we learned and kind of improved on the fly was, hey, we want music to be playing, right? We want something to be happening where the energy kind of stays up throughout the day, and something that we've seen kind of work really well throughout the year, and just in terms of kind of, I guess, building people's in-person enjoyment, and keeping that energy level high. So, and similarly on the broadcast side, we make sure that our broadcast team, our commentators, understand the narratives, understand player backgrounds, where they're from, what's brought them to where they are, to do some of the storytelling that needs to come across, right? That you might not pick up on if you're just watching the action by yourself. And I think trying to view ourselves, knowing that we, in a lot of ways, are responsible for telling our own story, and whether that's in the capacity of what's happening in stadium or on our content. As a startup league, if we aren't telling our story well, people aren't going to be able to do it better for us. And so, to be really clear about things like, hey, who's the home team? How do we emphasize that in Pittsburgh it's the Steel Toes as the home team? In Minnesota it's the Loonies. What are the little things we can do in the run of show to emphasize that? What are the things that we can tell people at home when they're watching the content on TV? How do we adjust our social media posting to reflect that? How do we adjust the way that we treat the graphics on Instagram, or things that basic, right? And really trying to make sure that we know what we're trying to communicate, and then be really clear and repetitive and detail oriented around how we try and do that. So it's like a concert or orchestral concert where you have all these different components trying to come together, and then at the core you have this like jazz exhibition, which is the sport itself, and the competition side taking place. That's really cool to see how it all comes together. And sometimes the narratives line up. In Pittsburgh, sometimes the narratives line up really well, right? You get the home team to do a major comeback from behind, and that's a great story, and the crowd buys it, the commentators buy it. Everyone's kind of we figured it out, and sometimes it doesn't happen, right? I think that's the beauty of sports, of why people love sports, why people will love PR7s, because we love the competitive side of sevens and the uncertainty, I think, to a potentially unhealthy degree. The fact that every game is up in the air, and it really comes down to a bounce of the ball here or there sometimes. It creates a really cool and fun atmosphere and experience for, I think, the people that are engaged in it.
Yeah, the other part that I discovered on my drive with Sean Lindersmith to the stadium one morning on match day is he was telling me that you've made a big effort to be out in the community well before any match day, not only to recruit players but to just have that community involvement. Can you talk a little bit about how that mission has been working for you?
Yeah, for sure. The community, I mean, we talk about kind of the three hallmarks of PR7s as a company, right? It's competition, fun, and community. The community angle, I think, is such an important piece, especially in rugby. And rugby is a community game, right? It's around the world. It is a a game that is, built by, at the grassroots, and, everything comes out of the grassroots operations of an organization of the sport. It's a major priority for us because, as a traveling circuit, one of the things that we, don't get kind of for free, right, is that sense of place, right? We don't get that, hey, we are, in this city by nature, even our company from just a general employment structure, we're fully distributed across the country, right? Sean is in Minnesota, I'm in New Hampshire, and there's people all over the place, and so we have kind of our own little communities, but we don't have this sense of, teams are here all the time. And so I think it's really important for us to make a huge effort in that respect to go out and engage a lot of the fantastic ongoing work that's being done in rugby in America, and has been going on for years. I think one of the things that surprises a lot of people is just how much rugby there is in the United States. When you look at from college programs to clubs in cities to high school programs, it is a growing sport, and there is a lot of growth in across from coast to coast, and so our efforts, right, are about one is to bring a professional game that has entertainment value into markets that don't have pro rugby, but have great community rugby. Like Pittsburgh is a great example of that. And what we I think part of what we want to do is build the connections through the teams, right? We want the teams to be represented. We want people to care about what's happening. We want the outcomes to matter. We want them to mean something to people, and just that's so much of sports is meaning, right? It's meaning and connectivity to what you're ultimately trying to you're trying to foster a bond between an individual and a team, right? And whether and I think a lot of that gets done through geography, but where we see that we can amplify that is how do we help and build and kind of collaborate with clubs across the country and programs across the country to say, hey, this is we are our PR7 is a celebration of the sport, right? It's a celebration of everything that makes the sport so special. We've done things from we launched a talent ID program where we've hosted I think over 15 identification sessions where effectively it's an open tryout, right? People can come, they can go, and they can they show up, they register, they get they get a number, and then they do the metrics, they run a 40, right? They play in a scrimmage, they kind of have an opportunity to showcase their skills. And the coaches are there watching them, right? And they say, hey, this player's, here. I think one of the cool things that we did with that this year was we wanted to make sure that there was a kind of connectivity between those, the tryouts in those markets and the teams that were be there. So in each market where we hosted a tryout, there was a team preference, right? There's a team that had kind of right of first refusal on any talent coming out of that. And so, we saw that in a couple different places where players that were ID'd at a tryout ultimately ended up getting, a PR7's contract and actually played in the league. I think the example that jumps off the bat to me is, Misha Shorin, who is based out of Pittsburgh and played for the Pittsburgh Forge Club. He was I came to the tryout, identified at a talent ID session, was kind of had the right of first refusal placed on him, and got put into the Steel Toes roster, and then has scored 2 tries for the Steel Toes, including one in Pittsburgh. That's that local connectivity that and that gets people excited, right? Because all of a sudden it's not just, hey, there's a tournament here, but it's a Pittsburgh player playing for the a Pittsburgh team, scoring on TV, right? That has meaning, that has depth to it, and that is it's cool. Right? I think at the end of the day, it's a cool thing to see where you say that's what we are hoping for. Another part of what we're doing, we've built out a club affiliate program where we've engaged with local clubs in the various markets across the country, where they can come and they can, recruit for free at our games, or they set up they'll set up a tent. They'll put up a sign-up sheet and say, hey, are you interested in playing rugby? You can come and be a part of this. It helps kind of foster those connections, build those relationships, and really, and if there's ways that we can engage further, it's just a great way to open those channels and just kind of say, hey, we want you to be part of what we're doing. We want to make this a connected experience. And we've done other things that we've looked at are we've worked with youth organizations and other groups across the country, whether that be in the Bay Area, where we ran a youth clinic. It was in San Mateo. We did a youth clinic with high school, middle school girls teams, where we ran the entire Golden State Retrievers team went out and practiced with the teams and helped them on their defensive wall structure and line out defense, really specific stuff, and really just kind of connecting people to hey, there's this whether it's the upskilling or other things like that. I mean, there's so much. I think that there's so much fantastic stuff that's happening in the sport, and so much stuff that I think is just we want to connect to, because there is I think a really exciting future for rugby in the U.S. and something where if we can get people excited about it, it will it just changes the dynamic. So it's a very community. I mean, the depth of the community is so important, and I think even just from where we've started, I think I've told our team this, and I'm not sure they might be. I think it will definitely land more once we've kind of gotten through the last event, but. I think one of the big things I'm looking at this next year, right, when the run up to when we kind of have PR7s 2024 and put that schedule out, is a lot of the off season work is going to be community development, right? It's going to be actually going into markets. We went into probably each market 3 or 4 times, right? Each city 3 or 4 times, and it's that's probably going to double, right? That's going to be, hey, what sort of we'll probably be doing more talent ID, more youth sessions, more kind of social and cultural events, more kind of rugby 101 for new audience type of events. It really is a massive priority for us, just because it's so critical for the viability of rugby in this country to be able to connect to what's happening at that level. And and the feedback that we've gotten has been so positive, and we're looking, so excited to continue to kind of work with some of the groups that we've been working with and to continue to build and foster those relationships. So,
well, and in addition to the players that you're trying to connect with here in the U.S., with the Rugby World Cup, the Men's Rugby World Cup coming in 2031, and then the Women's in 2033 on U.S. soil. I don't know if this is a strategy. I probably should have asked you this before, but we've been so busy. You've been bringing in a lot of international players as well. Ruby Tui, who's played and was in the broadcast booth with you. USA rugby players as well. And a couple of Fijian players, Alassio Naduva, who had a really good outing in Pittsburgh. What is there a strategy for bringing some of these players in to maybe help build that culture of rugby here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance, right? I think we definitely view, when we think about PR7s, we think about our we just to go into the product market fit, right? We want to be an American focused company, right? I think we've, and in large part to, I think, avoid some of the I think the pitfalls of trying to get too global and have too much travel and make things that are not quite as sustainable. We want to have, I think, sevens in time zones that are conducive to an American audience, with players that are recognizable, with in venues that are accessible, and create that a competition that is intuitive and I think I hate to use the word repeat, just connectable, but like something that people can connect to. This has been a big year for us in terms of an international footprint. It has obviously been a really awesome experience for us to have Ruby and Alacio and Stacey, Dan Norton, and all kind of other international star players be a part of this. And I think it's, if anything, it's additive to the experience to say, hey, this is a top level sevens event, right? This is a very, very high quality level of the game, but something that is has at its core, it's connected to the American community and grassroots ecosystem. We'll be spending a fair bit of time looking at how do we implement rules and regulations and to kind of to make sure that we balance the essence of the competition and keeping that focus and the connectivity to the American side of the coin with the international, I guess I would say availability, but we want it to be very complementary, right? We don't want it to be overwhelmed. We don't want this to, be a 100, just a reallocation of players, but really something that has a connectivity to the U.S., right, and helps, and gets people excited about what we're doing. But the internet, from an international perspective, it's I think if anything, it's really exciting to see governing bodies and players and especially players of the caliber that we've had this year buy into what we're doing. I've said this directly, but to her, but having Ruby buy into what we've been doing and say this is, I see it and I get it and I like it, is really, it's important, right? It's important for us to connect to that because where the game is going and where we want to be, we want to be moving in the direction with everybody else and rowing in the same direction, and to have large figures in the game be a part of that, I think is it's helpful for in so many different capacities. And so we're very, we feel very, very fortunate in that capacity and are very grateful to have players come in and I think be very positive contributors too. I think that's the other part too that I don't want to understate, that I think there's a really cool, I don't want to say attitude, but an approach that rugby players have towards things where it's very constructive and very looking to kind of continue to build the sweep the sheds mentality of like, how do we leave this in a better place than we found it, and having a real feeling of ownership over it. And that's been really cool to witness and to be a part of, because I think that's definitely been the attitude of the vast majority of players.
You've got some star power names there, and I know that just having observed in my 3 games that I've done with you this summer, people flock to them, and it's even the players. The players are like, I can't believe that I had the chance to either compete against Ruby or play alongside of her. So I think it's that to me seems like you're building the product in a way that is built for longevity. Of course, everybody wants to do that. But talk about some of those players that come outside in the different perspectives that they might have with what you're doing here.
Yeah, and Ruby is a great case study, but we've had some fantastic American players too. Naya Tapper and Abby Gustitis. We've had a number of Madison Hughes, right? A number of
Perry Baker,
American players. Perry Baker, yeah. Mm-hmm. A number of players that have, I think, kind of come in and really, I think the thing that I hope that we do, and I think we do, but I don't want to say it and then be told otherwise. But I think we are, we look and listen for feedback in a lot of ways, yeah. Right? And I think one of the things that when we talk about, it's funny, we have some players that have come back. We're in our Memphis championship, then weren't involved in 2022, and then are now involved in 2023 again. And what the kind of consistent feedback I've gotten is they say it almost in the exact same way. So they don't take this in like the wrong way, because Memphis was great, but like things are like way better. And I was like, and that's good, and like that's a really good I hear that, and that makes me very happy, because it means like we're trending in the right direction, right? We're not kind of like getting we didn't kind of come out with a flash and then get worse from there. So in a lot of ways, I think that's I think we solicit feedback. I think we incorporate it where we can. We also will acknowledge the realities of we're a startup sports league that's trying to build for longevity, right? We aren't at a place yet where this is it. We're not a I think we're very clear with what we can offer and what we offer, and I think and are transparent about that, and say is this something that you want to be a part of, because we're collectively building something together, and it's we want to make sure that as we continue to build, that we continue to invest in the areas of the program that will I think help us continue to grow. And it's an area where we are always, I think, receptive to the conversations, and I think we at the very least will give kind of a serious answer, right, on things where we say, yeah, this is what we can, we want to do this, and yes, you're right, this needs to be different, or that's a great idea, we should absolutely do that starting tomorrow, or maybe it's something we can't do, and or maybe it's not in the cards right away, and we can't, we're happy to have the conversation about when or if or how. So I think that's kind of the approach.
And on the notes that you were just kind of mentioning, and previously when we first started, getting the buy-in from some of your partners, I'd like for you to talk about how you're able to get sponsorship. But before that, because I'm on the broadcast side, how you're able to get buy-in from the networks to put it on Fox and on CBS is especially when you do have a new product. I know that can be kind of a daunting thing to convince them that, hey, we've got a quality product. How has that been for you?
Yeah, I mean it's a process, right? I mean we've been fortunate to work with a really tremendous team of advisors on the media rights side of the equation with David Sternberg and Dan Granick, that have helped us really since the beginning to help navigate a lot of the conversations. And as we go, it gets a little bit more, easier, right? The kind of back to the earlier point of kind of incremental progress and change. We're able to, as we continue to exist for a long point. I think there's some statistic I read about, when do sports leagues kind of, what's the time frame that they exist, right? And a lot of them will, I think it's like 90% are gone after 2 years, and we're almost 80%. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But I read something along those lines where it's like there's a lot that have one season. Not a major drop off on year two, but the drop between year 2 and year 3 is massive. And I think the thing that we've been trying to be very deliberate about is creating something that's sustainable, that has has the runway to have the impact, because that's half the battle. And by the time you get to year 3, right, it's it's a little bit of you have a little bit more of, you just have more time, right? You say, hey, we've done this before. This is the product. You can see it. You're not pitching a concept. You're pitching action, right? You say, here's the highlight package, right? Here's what we did this year. Here's what we did that year, and that makes it easier. And I think a lot of the the positive trends in the sport, the positive dynamics with the big events coming in terms of the Olympics and the Rugby World Cups, is going to be impactful, right? It helps us. It helps make the case that this is the sport that's coming next, and I think that narrative, it's helpful for us to get some interest from media partners, and that's it. I think as we continue to grow and push over time, it'll be about I think it will generate more interest from those media partners, and kind of how does that how do we build that that relationship where they are continuing to platform PR7s, platform rugby generally, and push that forward even in more fulsome capacities.
What kind of strategy do you think is important for a startup league to focus on when trying to get new sponsors?
Yeah, I think it's storytelling, right? It's storytelling until there's metrics, right? And you have, I think we have a really compelling story to tell, and some growth metrics that are pretty exciting that validate that. It is it's an ongoing process, but I think we're starting to see some brands take notice and interest in what we're doing. I think the nature of the sport and the values of the sport very helpful in that capacity, because it is such a constructive and positive type of activity that I think connects with a lot of people, and to have that be part of what we're about and what I think brands would like to see this be about, or how they would like themselves to be seen in the association with what we're doing is I think it helps us, and it's definitely a direction that we want to kind of keep making the case for. So it is it definitely takes time, it takes effort, it takes runway, right, where you just say, hey, it's not a concept anymore, right? The concepts are great for the endemic brands because they say, great, well, we know what this will be, and this is what we can do. But when you start to say, hey, this is what we have from a in stadium, we start to know what we have from a asset inventory perspective, from a valuation perspective, and what that and really it's just a question of finding partners that kind of align with our mission, vision, values, and building that.
I want to talk a little bit about the team names, because they are unique, and I know we talked a couple of weeks ago about how they came about. Talk about some of the team names. I can read off a couple of them for you. We've got the Rocky Mountain Experts, the Northern Loonies, the Southern Headliners, the New York Locals, the Pittsburgh Steel Toes, the Texas Team, the Rhinos ex-Loggerheads, the SoCal Loggerheads, and the
Golden State Retrievers.
The Golden State Retrievers based in San Jose. What goes into those names, and how do those franchises come about?
Yeah, the original concept when we first launched. So when we first launched, we had 6 total brands, but we had 6 men's teams and 4 women's teams when we first launched, and then largely that was a decision based off of availability and what for a recruiting standpoint, and I think gameplay, what we thought we could how we could build for quality, what we thought we could do from a talent depth perspective. So we've had kind of 6 brands at the beginning. The idea was I think high level knew directionally where we wanted to take it. Like, we didn't want to create a bunch of just generic names where it was like I don't want to throw any like sports brands under the bus, but names that could be applied to really any part of the country, right? The Tigers, right? Tigers could be Cincinnati football team. It could be a Detroit baseball team. It doesn't. There's not really a direct kind of affiliation with a city. And so what we wanted to do was, and what we worked with a branding a designer on a lot of it, was come up with concepts that were generally around a region, right? Where we said, okay, what are the angles that we could do if we wanted to do a vaguely southern team, or a vaguely Rocky, like mid Rocky Mountain area, vaguely Pacific Northwest, vaguely New York, Texas type, like how do we kind of create some brands that because part of the challenge was we didn't know where we were going to go, right? We were still in 2021. We had to create the brands and pick where we wanted the city. We didn't pick the cities beforehand. We kind of the brands came first, and we said where do we think that we'd want to start putting down some roots, and really explored a bunch of different concepts with each one, whether that was kind of imagery and motifs that we thought would be inherent to a city. We thought that the rock guitar concert type of energy from the headliners, was a southern, that was kind of the direction how it came together, and then we. The design there came from like a concert poster where it was that faded yellow to electric pink type of aesthetic, and really a lot of the team names just came out of the fact that we wanted things that were going to be unique. We wanted things that potentially could say, hey, this is. We knew that at some point we wanted to go to a certain group of people and say, hey, this is the team. Right, this is the team for you to back. This is the home team in this market, because I think one of the things that I love a lot about sports, right, is the partisanship. Right, I like a rivalry. I like the sense of place that comes with a team, and it's a challenge for us. Right, we have to create that. That's not something we get for free. We don't get that organically. We have to go out and create that, and really push it and drive it and make and turn it into reality, because we don't get it for free. So that was the process. We scaled back to 4 teams last year, so then all of a sudden it kind of came clear we've got these 4 brands that will be the ongoing teams. And then as we look to kind of come back out of the 4 and go to 8, we added the 2. We said, hey, well, where are we going to play? Right, and now when we're saying, hey, we got 5 events and not 1 event, we've got to expand, we've got to add teams, and we've got to pick what they're going to be. It became easy to say, okay, well, we need a team for Northern California, we need a team for Pittsburgh, right? And so then those were 2 different the team and the locals came back. It helped that the team was kind of the Texas-oriented team with the orange and the horse imagery. It's a team of horses. That's kind of the angle there. But it came down to when we were expanding this year, we said, hey, we want to create. We did a fan solicitation where we sent out a submit your best ideas and the concepts we liked the most from just talking with our designer. What we thought we could turn into a logo and a color scheme and things that would resonate with that area. We came up with the Golden State Retrievers and the Pittsburgh Steel Toes, and they've got colors that are emblematic of the city. They've got or of the region, right? You have the kind of navy and gold for the broader Bay Area. You've got black and gold for Western Pennsylvania, and that's the direction we want to take it, right? I think we want it to be much more of a honed in, refined. We want people when we come to town to know who they're rooting for, right? I think just putting on Rugby Sevens as a show, it's a great show, right? And there's definitely excitement to it, but I think where it kind of goes from, well, this is fun to watch, to this is the most nerve-wracking nonsense I've ever been a part of, is when you care, right? And I think when you care about who wins and loses, and I've seen it on the international circuit with the USA playing, and when you really care about the result of that game, it's crazy how fast it goes and how anxiety ridden it is, because every play is important. Every little bounce of the ball here or there is huge. And we wanted people to care. We want people to care about their team. And that was the why for why we did it.
How do those franchises come to be? Do people come to you and say, hey, I want to build a team and I'll put it together, or is it still under the PR7s?
Still under PR7s.
Okay.
That's a strategic decision for us. I think it helps us, when we look at kind of coming to a city, there's a lot of factors at play. Most importantly is there a place we can play, and is there a day we can play? And with those 2 questions answered, it gets a lot easier. I think what we've found some cities where we just don't answer all the questions, right? We would say, hey, people want to bring an event to this market. You say, well, where are we going to put it, right? Or is there this? Do we have a field that meets the standards from a player welfare perspective? Do we have a place where you can put goalposts, right? Do we have can it support broadcast infrastructure? Can it support? Does it have enough locker room space, right? And so I think one of the check the box items that we actually just use to filter out a lot of stuff. Is just what's the venue, what's the venue situation, right? What is the and is that venue interested in hosting us, right? Do they want this to come, or is this going to be like a not a high priority? And you get a spectrum, right? You get some places that say we are super excited to have this and we want to support it, and we want to help you, help make it a success. And other ones that will say, this is not a huge priority for us, or if you really want it, here it is. But and trying to tease that out a little bit is important, right? I think having aligned stakeholder groups in a market is huge for us, right? It starts with the venue, right? But it also is any sort of local sports agencies and groups that help support events in those towns. It extends down to the rugby communities and the how much they support the program, and are they interested in it, and being a part of it and engaging in a meaningful capacity with us. All those. It's definitely more art than science, but there's a lot of different boxes that we can kind of check off as we go.
Where does PR7s go from here? I imagine you're already planning for next year and the years beyond, but what's the immediate outlook for you and Premier Rugby Sevens?
Yeah, I mean, we got to get through what's in the week in front of us, which is to get as many people into into DC as possible for an exciting conclusion to 2023. The future, I think, is where I think this year was really exciting from a format perspective. I think we figured out a lot of cool things to do in that capacity. And really the question now on my end is, can we, I don't think we need to add teams necessarily. I think we have a lot of, a good size for the moment. And I think the biggest thing is just is duration of the season, right? I think we'd like it to be longer. I think we'd like it to be have more reach, whether that be adding more. I think 5 stops is great, and if 5, we're not going to add any stops that aren't good, right? So I think the thesis is that we've got a really good kind of core piece, and what do we want to add to that? Do we want to where do we want to potentially put down some more roots, right? Where do we want to continue to grow and scale? So I think I'll give our team has been thinking about it for quite some time, right? We've been the big angle that we've been pushing for is to try and look around the corners as early as possible, because the more that we determine up front, the better position we are from just a general operations and execution standpoint. We have a lot of momentum and a lot of really cool options in front of us, and just will be about trying to figure out what makes the most sense for our company right now, and really what makes sense for fans, right? What do fans want to see? Do they want to, how do we kind of make a product that is even more exciting for them, that will get their buy-in and I think interest for a longer period of time throughout the year. So, but we will see. It's a lot of factors on variables on the table at the moment, and we have to see how it plays out.
Well, if you, the listener or viewer, if you want to find out more, you can visit PR7s.com. Has pretty good explanation of the league and what's coming up. When I was part of NBC Sports, we did travel to England. Me and one of our announcers, Nick Gismondi, who's on the broadcast this year, and Dean Walker, who's handled the Austin venue and the championships coming up. A couple of us went to England and checked out where rugby started, and it was at rugby school. So if you have a chance to get out there, I definitely recommend it. They have a small little museum, and then of course the William Webb Ellis statue, which is right outside, that signifies it. He did pick up the ball and he ran with it, and there's still some debate in the rugby community on if that actually did happen or if it was actually William Webb Ellis. It was a lot of fun for me to get over there, and I learned a lot about the sport back then, and I truly appreciate what you're doing. I think you have a great product, and hopefully continues to grow. And sounds to me like with the team you've assembled, it's not going to be a problem. It's more of how quickly the audience latches on to it.
Yeah, no, and it's been a great summer working with you on it. I appreciate you having me on here to talk to your audience about what we're doing, and hopefully we'll have some more exciting developments coming up that we'll send your way.
All right, Owen, I appreciate your time, and we'll hopefully see you down the road soon, and best of luck to you.
That's good. Thanks, Don. Really appreciate it. Great to be on.
Thanks again to Owen Scannell for sharing how he's building the next great sports league, Premier Rugby Sevens. As of this recording, we are heading into the championships for PR7s taking place at Audi Field in Washington, D.C. on August 6, 2023, so be sure to check it out. I'd also like to take an opportunity to thank Dean Walker for including me on the PR7's broadcast team, to Ross Production Services, and the entire PR7's team. Again, if you're listening, you can check out some of the visuals on YouTube at Sportsmaking. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. If there's someone who works in the sports industry that you'd like to hear from, drop a comment on YouTube or on the Facebook page. Also, like, share, and review. Thank you for spending time with me on Sports in the Making. I'm your host, Don Cardona.